So I've already shown you some of the stuff that's in here, all right? Number one, they say that's the toolbar. And the best way to find out what those are is to just push your mouse over them, all right? And it'll show it to you, okay? All right, this is pretty much in here. This is your work area. Now, you haven't seen all this stuff yet, all right? But when we look in here, and I'm going to go back in here to, don't want this open anymore, into here, all right? So notice when I'm over here, okay, I can come in here and they've got, like, there's declared attributes, there's layout, there's a bunch of other stuff that's in here, all right? So what I'm telling you is you are able to go in here and you're able to change the different things that are in here, either in here or in here. That's what I'm getting to, all right? And which one do you use? Yeah, what does that mean? It means any one you want to use. You'll notice if I come in here and if I say hello world, I'm going to change this to welcome to AWD1112. All right, I just made that change. You saw it. All right, and I go back in here and I go to design mode. It's kind of hard to read, but it's already been changed. So you can change them in either place. It's no big thing. All right, this is your toolbar, for lack of better words, and you'll notice it's categorized. Now, one thing, for some reason, people don't seem to like this. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other. But notice if I go to text, it's got here text view, and these are all the different kinds of text views that you can get there. And if it's hard for you to see, go just bring it up on yours. You can do it the same way. Well, you can't, but all right. A text view is a label. It's what we've always called a label. There's also something called an edit text. That's a text box. So it's a little confusing word-wise. And why is all that stuff important? Well, notice in here, if I set it to password, I'm not going to, but if I bring a text thing out and I set it to password, anything I type into it will show as those black dots, okay? The ones that you're going to be concerned with the most, though, and see, I can move this around too, but the ones you're going to be concerned with most are probably these number ones. So for instance, when we create our height and our weight, we're going to set it to number signed. So you won't be able to put in a negative number, so we no longer have to check for that. The only thing we actually have to check for is if you leave it blank. And I like that because it's going to allow me to show you something that you can create that's called a toast. How they came up with that name, I have absolutely no idea. But a toast is a little message that typically prints right down here. And what we'll do is we'll say something like, you must input a number into this field, something like that. Or maybe for height, you must input a height between 12 and 96, something like that. All right, and you know there's durations. You can set it either to short or long. I think short stays up for like a second and a half, and long stays up for 3 or 4 seconds. It's not hard to do. It's just you have to put the code in to do it. It's not hard. All right. But there are different kinds of buttons, widgets. So notice there'll be like image views, and there's other. I'm not going to read them to you. This is I don't know why they did this, but a few versions ago of this package, they changed your default layout from what was called a linear layout to what's now called a constraint layout. You can see all these squigglies and stuff on here. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. All right. But I don't have any problem if, you know, I've been using the constraint one for a while now. I still screw it up. I mean, you've over the 2 years, you've known I screw up more than my share anyway. But if you decide we're doing a project and you'd rather have it be a different layout, you can do that. All right. We're going to get to what all this stuff means. So if you look in here, what all these numbers mean, what wrap content means, as opposed to, well, they don't show it here, but there's one called match parent. You're going to learn the difference between SPs, which are scalable pixel units, and DPs, which are density pixel units. You're going to learn all that stuff. And after you've done it once or twice, it's, you know, it'll be like, oh, that's not hard. All right. You'll notice in here right now, I've got this little yellow thing. And it's telling me, hey, if I put my mouse over it, it says, come on. Typically, what it will say is you've got a couple attributes in that you can add to your XML file. Or you can sometimes choose them in here as well. Okay. All right. That's probably enough in here. This is called the component tree. This is kind of like, do you remember when we were in C# and I showed you whatever control was active, you had it in the title bar was in the, on the right-hand side by the properties window, but you could click that down arrow and you could move from control to control. That's kind of what you can do here too. You can actually go, I believe, and add things in here. I have never done it. I don't know why you'd want to do that when you've got this right here. All right, but again, that's the component tree. This is called the tools palette. All right, if you look in here, if you look up on top, it says palette up here also. And if you notice, we got this thing here, it kind of looks like a football. See that? If you click that, that's how you can go from portrait to landscape. All right. And if you remember, one of the first things I showed you before was that manifest file. You can set up your manifest file so that it's portrait only or so that it's landscape only. So for instance, if you were creating a game and you wanted to make sure they played landscape, you could set it up for landscape only. All right. What you're going to find now, if I go in here, watch this. If I change to landscape, it still looks pretty good because it is centered. But what you're going to find, probably at least when we do the one for the BMI, when you put it, when you put it over to landscape, it's going to look kind of sucky, for lack of better words. I will expect that when you do your project, that it'll work on either screen and it'll look nice on either screen. Whether it's portrait or whether it's landscape. You just do this again to bring it back. Well, that one. Go back to portrait. Okay. Try to think of what else is in here. Most of the stuff that's in here, there's other ways of doing it, so you probably aren't going to use them anyway. All right. So let's see what they have here. So I've shown you all of this stuff. All right, except for one thing, and that is this thing that's, can't see it right now. Let's see, come on. When you start to run the program, what you're going to see is down here, there's another thing that can open up. All right, in fact, I think I might have to show you there. All right, now, can we show it here? All right, there. There's Logcat, there's Build, there's Terminal, etc. What you can do, what I never did enough with any of my classes, and I've got to do more of it. When we were working in JavaScript and you wanted to print out the value of something, typically I'd use an alert. They really recommend you don't do that in JavaScript. They recommend you use the console window, which shows basically on the bottom of your screen, the bottom right-hand corner. This console, Logcat sends stuff to the console. So what will happen is when the program runs, you'll see a console window that'll come up right here, and you can print different stuff to it if you want to. Sometimes what people like to do is they like to add what are called log statements, because I want to make sure I'm getting into this routine and this routine and this routine, and that's one way that you can do it. All right, so we'll talk about that as we go on. All right, like I said, I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing anything here. And as I already mentioned, I don't expect you to remember this stuff anyway, but at least you've been exposed to it. So that's what the window will look like down here. All right, so let's see. So I said the toolbar, navigation bar, editor pane, status bar. Yeah, we've pretty much looked at all these. All right. So they show this stuff right here. And again, some of this I've gone over already. I mentioned that you can click the down arrow and go to the different views. And you're probably going to want either project or Android anyway. I talked to you a little bit about the manifest file. I had you open up the res. In values, we did open up in there. We opened up the layout. You saw your activity_main.xml file. We opened up the values, and you saw strings.xml. You saw themes.xml, and you saw colors.xml. I showed you the Gradle, and I said that the module app is the one you're going to change most of the time. So, I mean, if you want more than I'm giving you, what I'm telling you is it's right here, okay? All right. They go into the manifest. One thing they mention, this is relatively new, is there's something in here. Did they show it? Where is it? This allow backups. All right. And typically what that'll do, now you may or may not know about this, but before there was Microsoft Word, okay, there was software, and you may have heard of it, you may not have, but this was 20 years ago maybe, called WordPerfect. All right. And with WordPerfect, by default, it didn't automatically save documents for you. You had to remember to save. And if you didn't, usually it didn't even prompt you at the end. You might have just lost it. But then, Word came and they had autosave, and you could set it up to autosave every 2 minutes or every whatever. Well, this allow backup is kind of like an autosave. You should keep it at true, because supposedly what it does is it's going to automatically save at certain points when you're working on a program. All right. If you want more about it, you can go take a look in here, because they explain it much better, this auto backup, than I could. All right. The app icon I already mentioned to you. By default, it's set to IC Launcher, and that's a little picture of the Android logo. That's all it is. But you can go in and you can change it. We will. All right. This is what I meant, though. Notice for a label, this is what you'll do. This says you go into the strings file, and in the strings file, there should be an entry in there that's named app_name. You will take that value that's associated with app_name, and you will use it. If you go, I don't get it, you probably do anyway, but I just want to show you this. So if I go into here and I bring up the manifest file, and notice under the label here, it says it's got this. You go, see that? You see what happened when I clicked on it? That's the actual value. So if we go into our strings, why is it allowing me to go in there? Here we go. And I go into values and I go into strings. Notice app name, my application. But when you actually fill out those values yourself, it fills out the app name for you. But when you actually fill them out, you'll be using this. All right. Now, Paul used to get real persnickety, for lack of better words, and I think he used to take off every time you didn't do that. I might warn you once, but you will be told when you take your next test, hey, use the strings.xml file. So virtually everything that you put in there, the names of labels or edit text views, the names of if you've got a name for an edit text, that you put some text in there, the names the text on anything, whether it be an edit text, a text view, a button, whatever it is, you should use the strings file. All right. The theme we talked about a little bit, but as it says, it sets the app's theme. I don't want to talk about that any more than that, because for quite a while, you're not going to be using that anyway. You're just going to use the defaults. All right. The Android, it's got the Android version in here that you're using. And notice this is the minimum that it'll support, and this is the one that it's actually written for. That's what they're telling you in here. All right. In fact, if we go look at ours, we bring that file up again. I was going to say, it may not even show it. What they do over time is they'll sometimes show you things, and then they'll take it out because people aren't playing with it very much, and they'll either put it someplace else or it's just gone. All right. I've already mentioned, so you'll always know, so when you take a look in here, you'll notice .java, .xml. Anytime you're writing pure Java code, or if we get into a Kotlin project, pure Kotlin code will always be in a .java file for Java, and Kotlin files end with .kt. Okay? I don't know why, but that's what they picked for the extension for that. All right. So they go through here and they start talking about it. All right. And again, they mentioned that they bring this in for backward compatibility. But they go through basically what everything in here means. So you'll notice this is extending app compat activity. And they're trying to say, again, make sure, since we're going in here from version 14 to 19 in this case, we want to make sure we're going to support all that. And that's what that thing is doing, is it's trying to make sure that it's backwards compatible. Now, the next section, this is probably, in my humble opinion, the most important part of this chapter, because they talk about layouts. Again, I already mentioned this to you. That's the constraint layout. Your window looks different. It used to be, they had this set up differently than they do right now. Now they've got it into different areas, if you remember me showing you that. It used to be every one of these was stacked after one another like that. So they've changed it over time. The component tree I mentioned to you, but I mentioned the build process to you, but someplace in here coming up, they're going to show you pictures of the different layouts. All right. So this is that build Gradle. Again, you don't want to play with the project one. As it says, this file is generated by Android Studio, should not be edited. You want the build Gradle if you ever do. And the one that says module app, and you will typically add something like in here under the dependencies. We'll do that much later in the semester, so you don't have to worry about it. All right. It says here plugin and Android blocks. I'm not going to say anything about that, except I do want to mention, you'll see this at the end of the chapter. There literally are a lot of sites out there for Android, as you'd guess. But I think it's under the developer.android.com. They actually have code snippets that are out there. So if you find, hey, I'm doing this all the time, I wonder if there's a snippet, you might want to look and see if there is. Then you can just drop it into your code. I like to just type it myself, but everybody's different. All right, I mentioned the target SDK, etc. So I went over that stuff with you. They're going through everything that's in this Gradle file. Again, I'm not going to talk about it because you typically aren't going to have to change it other than maybe to add a dependency or two. And really, you shouldn't change it. This is the thing that link that used to be in there. I haven't seen it in there, at least when I was doing Kotlin last week. I had to go up, like I showed you, I had to go up to like the fourth or fifth one over here and sync it there. There was nothing that came down here with like a link that said sync like it shows here. All right, emulator. They show you how to create the emulator. I already did. All right, so we went through that already. And again, you can create several different emulators. Literally, it's almost unlimited. I mean, you could make 40 or 50 emulators. Every time you create one, it's taken up a little bit more memory, and it keeps all of the configurations, but I don't think it's terrible as far as the size. I would just grab one or two that you like, maybe one tablet, maybe one or two phones, and just use those. But it's your call. How to run it? Well, I've already shown you that. Again, back when they did this, I know that the last time I taught this class, there was not a default one like this. We had to build an emulator. Did yours come up? And it did. It came up on the screen with it, and it was already had an emulator then?
The message came up.
The phone came up?
Yeah.
Okay. Then what that should mean at least is you've already got an emulator. You literally could get through the rest of this semester if you don't care about tablets and never have to touch that AVD with Android Virtual Device Manager. You could just use that one and it would work fine. All right, so the running it, this shows in here, so this is the bottom of page 29. They start talking about in here how you hook it up to your device. So if you want to hook it up to your own phone and see what it looks like, I know you said you've got an iPhone, but let's just say that one of your kids or whatever has a tablet, or you've got a tablet, or you've got or you want to just use the tablet that we're going to give you. All right. And it's funny because I was reading through Mr. Smith's documentation, and it sounds like he's letting them take the tablets home. He told me to never let them out of the room. And he was really adamant about that. And the reason that's important, those people are only coming in there one day a week. So I always wondered what would happen if somebody started taking the class, decided to drop, and didn't want to give the tablet back. So I don't know how he's doing that. So none of my business, I guess. Here's that log I told you about. So when you do logs, you say log dot, and then you put a letter in there. Notice that D, these are the ones. D is for debug. E is for error. What's the difference? An error appears in red on your screen. Debug appears in black. And what you're going to see is all this stuff scrolling on your screen. And you're like, I don't even know where the hell my stuff is. You can go in there and you can filter. You can tell it I only want to see errors, or I only want to see my stuff, etc. So we'll get into all that stuff as we go on in here. So those are the log messages. Again, it's kind of hard to see, but they put a log in there that just said, hey, I'm in Maine, say hello world. And it's right there. It literally says hello world. It's kind of hard to see, but that's where it is. All right. This must be the one then with the layouts in it. We're making good progress, believe it or not. And I don't know, this may seem really boring to you. I don't know, but I mean, we got to go through this stuff. We basically got to go through everything just about that's in this thing. Now, did I talk to you two last semester at all about model view controller? Did we talk about that? Okay, all right. In the past, when people have talked about different setups and different ways to write applications, one of the more popular ones is model view controller. Model is all the data that you want to model. It could be a database, it could be a file, it could be just input from the user, but it's the data. View is how you're going to show it to the user. Okay? And the model and the view, they're not allowed technically to talk directly to one another. All right? They talk through the controller. So the controller is like the supervisor. So, you type it, the way that it works typically is a URL comes in and it goes to one of the controllers, whatever controller is supposed to handle that URL. The URL says, the controller says, oh, to do this, I need this model. So it calls that model. That model does something with the data, returns that data back to the controller. The controller says, oh, good, now I can send it back to the user. So the controller sends it to the view, which sends it back to the user as HTML. All right. The reason I'm telling you all that is it's sort of the same thing in here, but instead of calling it the controller, they call it the presenter. But when you look, it says views are the interface element. So when on your screen right now, the one that you had and the one that you hopefully saw at least, you had just that little text view on it that said hello world. The screen itself is a view. Every widget you put on the screen is also a view. So you had two views right there. One view that represented the screen, one view that represented the text view that was on there. So every time you add something new, it's a view. All right. Presenters, as it says, connect the application views to the model. You'll notice again, there's no direct talk between the model, which holds your data, and the view, which shows your data. All right, here it's the presenter in the middle. What we saw before, it was the controller that was in the middle. So the controller is similar to that, but the way they're making it sound here is the controller is not quite as the presenter is not quite as powerful as the controller is. All right, again, I don't know if that made a lot of sense, but the author says again right here, the UI consists of a hierarchy of objects called views. Every element of the screen is a view. So is the screen itself. It says the view class represents the basic building blocks. So you can click on these if you're interested and find out a lot more about text views, edit text, buttons, etc. Later, have you ever done this? In fact, for instance, like on here, just to show you real quick. I don't want to waste any of our time. So if I go on to my contacts list, right here, okay, I got a list of them, right? Maybe you got tons more than me. It doesn't matter. But the point is, if I go to my contacts list, all right, and if I go there, or try to go there, if I go to my contacts list, the idea is if I click a contact, it'll give me information about just that contact, correct? All right, what we'll do is we will work with a recycler view. This is what I had them do last year, all right? What we did was we grabbed a picture of each person who was on the St. Louis Blues. All right, and some people didn't like it, especially if they weren't hockey fans, and I'm not a hockey fan, but that's why I chose that. And what we did was, in here, what we had was a picture of each one of them. And then if you click the picture, it brought up a little bio on each one. That's what what you use typically for a recycler view that they mentioned right here. All right, all right. But we'll work with all of this stuff. The only one that I don't work with often on this list is a scroll view, which does allow you to do some scrolling. So for instance, if you had a real long thing of text and you only wanted to show part of it, but you wanted to let the user scroll through it, you might use a scroll view for that. All right. You can group stuff together, and they mentioned that here's an example. Here they're using what's called a view group. All right. But this is what I wanted to show you before. So linear layout, relative layout, constraint layout. So linear says it's a group that are positioned and aligned either in a horizontal way or in a vertical way, all right? As they mentioned, relative, each view is positioned and aligned relative to the other views. We've got constraint. Sometimes it's going to drive you nuts. So that's why I said, and I started telling that to people last year when I taught this, if it really bothers you, change the layout type. Well, how do I learn about that? Well, you got to go out to developer.android.com. You're not going to go over those? No. Well, then they didn't want to do it because it involved extra work, all right? But they'll show you. So here's some pictures. There's a linear. There's a relative. There's a grid where it's meant to be, you kind of positioning the screen into certain, chunks where each chunk is the same size. There's a table where you can do different things. All right. as it says, if you want to learn more about the layout types, this always links back to developer.android.com in here. All right, and they show an example of one. Yeah, that's fine. So this is a linear one that they're showing here, and it's got what? It looks like it's got a button. That is a button right there for toast. That's another button that's got the text view in it, and that's another button there. You don't have to make the buttons the whole width, but you can do that if you want to. We'll talk about how you do that pretty soon. All right, so they talk some more then about the layout editor and the stuff that's in here. Some of this stuff I've shown you. Some of it, again, looks a little bit different than it did in this 2018 book, just so you know that. This is what, page 36? But one thing that's nice about this is they do give you an explanation of what each component in there is. All right. And if you want more, for example, if you want to learn more about the toolbar, then they show you that here. All right. XML, I've already started to talk to you about it, and they show some examples. So when we look right here, what do we have? Well, virtually every single widget widgets are what they call the controls. They're Android widgets. Every widget that you put on your screen, all right, should have an ID. And what's an ID? It's a name, right? That's what it is. And when you name it, you put it in here, and you put it in double quotes, and you put an @ sign, a plus sign, ID / followed by the name. Then if I ever use this in other places, then I just use button _ toast. So the only time you use the @ sign and the plus sign and the ID, the only time is when you declare it. And that's giving it an ID or a name right there. All right. And they show you some of the stuff. What's weird is to me, as the saying goes, the only thing that's consistent about this is the fact that it's inconsistent. So what I mean is this. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go back to this activity thing. And I'm going to go into my code mode. All right. Now, let's say I want to do something else with this Android here, but I don't know what it is. You with me? I just want to do something. I don't know what it is. So if I type in Android : now it shows me all the things I can add or change or whatever. All right. So I can take a look through here, and you'll notice it's not a small list. Now I'm going to keep going, and you'll notice, do you notice what's not in there? Text, because it's already chosen. You see that? But there, if you told me there's 100 of these, I'd believe you. All right, so there's a bunch of stuff that you can set up that way. And what I meant when I said it's not consistent is sometimes they start with Android. Whoops, must have removed the wrong one. There. Sometimes they start with app. And I don't know why that is. Maybe that's even explained in here, and I didn't see it. I don't know. Here they talk about how you uniquely identify it, and you start it again when you define it with the @ sign, the plus sign, AD /, and when you reference it, you don't do that. You just do it like this. All right. Some of this stuff, one of the reasons that this class is taught in the last semester is you've had both using CSS and you've had a lot of programming. But guess what's in here? Width, height, padding, margin, sound familiar? And you use them the same way. All right. So none of that stuff is exactly going to change. So that you can set a padding at once with all 4, or you can set them separately. Again, that should sound familiar to you. Notice there's a couple more. There's not just top, bottom, left, and right, but there's a start and an end. All right. And it says, sets the padding for the start of the view, says used in place of the above, especially with views that are long and narrow. So if you're not sure, typically if the system thinks it should be in there, you might even get a warning that says that you should set that particular thing. It doesn't give you an error, but it'll give you a warning to let you know. All right. Here's some more relative positioning stuff. Now this can be really important because it's got a line. So if on that picture that we saw, let's just use this one. All right. If this is some kind of a, let's assume for a second that this is a text view, so it's like a label. And let's say that this down here is a scroll view. All right. Then if I want to align this one, that's the parent I'm aligning it with. Does that make sense? You can align things with parents. You can align them with sides of the screen. There's a lot of different ways that you can set different things up. We will go through a lot of those. The reason that becomes important though is if you don't set it up right, when it might look really nice on the screen, but when you run it, I've had that happen before, it says, hey, put a button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. I put it in there, it's perfect. I run the program, guess where it appears? In the upper left-hand corner because you didn't set all the attributes you were supposed to set. All right. Okay, some of the other stuff you can set, text color. I'm not going to run through that stuff. You can take a look at it if you're interested. These resource files, I mentioned some of them for you. Again, drawable, as it says, you put some images in there, you put your icons in there. Layout we already looked at with the XML file. When we get to where we're talking about recycler view, you're going to build your own layout at that time. Again, that's probably in week 12, 13, so it's not going to be for quite a while yet. All right. I went through the strings file with you. There's a way they talk about this. It says you can extract this, and I don't know. I did want to show you this. So if I go back here, I'm going to go into my activity main, but I want to go into design mode here. All right, if I go and click on here, all right, I'm trying to remember now how we bring this up. So you'll notice right now there's no ID for this. See that? Now, if I give it a name, let's just say this right that's in here right now, it's a text view. So let's say I want to call it text view hello. All right, I just come in here and I type in text view hello, just like that, and I hit enter. Okay, boom. It's changed the name here. Hopefully you can see that. And if I go into my code mode, notice it changed it here as well. All right, and all I'm telling you is if you change it in design mode, don't add the @ sign and the plus sign, and the slash. But if you do it here, you must do it that way. So that's why I'm saying you can do this stuff in different ways. All right. So they talk about going in and changing your strings in another way. You can read that. I don't ever use that. All right. Colors, we already talked about. Dimensions, it's if you decide, for example, that let's just say that you're creating a screen and some of the controls you want the size of your text to let's say be 30 SP units, and some of them you want to be 20 SP units. You can set them all individually, or you can basically set dimensions and have it set up like that. So it's a more standardized way of setting things up. Again, we're going to go through a lot of this stuff as we go on in here. Styles, as it says, it specifies common attributes like height, padding, font color, etc. So you could apply styles to different components or different widgets that are on your form. All right. Responding to menu clicks. So let's just to show you this. I'm going to show you the easy way, and I'm not going to show you the hard way right now, but we will look at both. The easy way, I'm going to come into here, and not there. I'm going to come into my activity main, and I'm going to go into design mode, and I'm just going to drag over a button. So I'm going to click on buttons, and I'm going to click on buttons right there. All right. What I want to have happen then is when that button's clicked, I want it to show a message on screen. Are you with me? Just something. I don't care what. I'm not going to even put the code in, but what I want to show you is this. When I click on this, and I'm not sure why what's showing up here is showing up. Usually, there it is, common attributes. That usually when you go down here, there'll be something for the button that'll say on click for a button. I'm looking, I don't see it right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add it. It wasn't there, but I'm going to show you how you can add it the other place. All right, and that is I'm going to go into my code mode, okay? And I'm going to put in here, there's my button. I don't know why it's red, but it's red right now. And I'm going to put in here, I'm just going to type it. I don't know what it's called, so I'm typing it on click. See that? And it shows me that. So now I can come in here and I can write in hello world. All right, again, Don't worry about it being red. That'll be fixed. That's not a big thing. But the point is this. I can do that, and I can do it here. Keegan said he saw it over here, so I know it's over here someplace. There it is, on click. So you can do it in either one. The other way that you can set these things up, so what that means is, if I run this program right now and I click right here, the program's going to break because it's going to try to run a method that does not exist. All right, and it'll basically crash right in front of you. It'll just say basically the program is quitting. All right, but if I put some code in there, it would run that code. All right, we'll do that right away because we'll have the calculate and the clear buttons when we do the BMI. All right, but the other way that you can do it is you can come in to this file and you can set up your on-clicks in there too. All right, so we'll look at both ways of doing it as we go on in here. If you want to know more, here they show you with the on-click. And yeah, we'll look at toast. We'll do all this stuff. All right. I didn't want to throw too much stuff at you on the first day that we went into Android. This is a little bit confusing, but I want to mention to you what it is. First of all, this is old. Okay. Now, notice it's got here show count equals text view, find view by ID. What the hell is that? All right. First of all, there is a special file that gets created that's called an R file. All right, I'll show you where it is, not right now. I know where it is. Don't ever touch it. Don't ever do anything with it because it's a way, you're almost assured that if you jack with it, your program won't work. It's a system file. All right, what it does is that file holds everything that you create using the XML. It holds it and it has its name. So what this says is show count, M show count. This is going to be a variable that I'm creating. And I want to associate it with something that's called show count in my XML, a text view. So I'm telling it to go out and find, using the ID that I gave it, go out into this R file, look through the IDs for one that's called show count, and assign that to this. I don't know if that made sense or not. And if it didn't, don't worry about it because you're going to see it next week. Now, it used to be that you had to go and you had to cast it into the right data type. So you had to put something, if it was a button, you'd put button in there. You don't have to do it that anymore. It automatically puts it in as the right type, so you don't have to cast. You still can cast it, but I think you get a warning if you cast it now that says that's no longer necessary. So you can do it, but you don't have to. All right. This is set up on here. This is showing you, this shouldn't look that different to you from some of the Java we looked at. So every time you click the button that says count up, you're going to add 1 to the counter. If it's not equal to null, what you're saying there is you want to show it. All right, well, this is set text. Remember the setters and getters? If you want to set the text inside of something, you call set text. If you want to grab the text that's inside of something, you call get text. All right. So next, this whole thing pretty much is on text views. So if you want more stuff on text views, but guess what? It's so similar to a label, you already know the most important stuff. Again, this is written for somebody with no experience whatsoever. You know, all right, no programming experience whatsoever. So they explain the different stuff. This is what one thing in here I do want to mention. Notice it's got width and it's got height. All right, and you notice that it's got match parent and one says wrap content. Almost always, not always, but almost always when you do controls, you want it to say wrap content, which means just take up the amount of space it needs. On the other hand, if I take and say that something is match parent, then if I've got something that takes up my whole screen, it's telling it to take up the whole screen. So match parent means take up as much room as you possibly can. Wrap content means take up all the room you need and only that. Now, when we get to the recycler view, that thing I showed you before, we'll stick like a text view or something on top. Then our recycler view, we'll tell it to match the parent. We'll tell it to take up the rest of the screen. Just like you have that on your contacts. It'll be the same type of thing. All right. Here, as it says, these are the attributes you'll use most often. Well, text is the text. You want to set text color. Appearance, where you can go in and you can change things like bold, italicize, etc. Text size. Notice SP, I already mentioned this. With text, you use SP. That's scalable pixels. It's supposed to scale based on the type of device you're using. So it will look smaller, of course, on a phone than it will on a tablet type of an idea. Almost everything else that you do will be DP. Those are density pixels. They don't scale like scalable pixels do. But just remember, SP is for text, DP is typically for everything else. Okay? All right. And they go over this again, how you would refer to this. But again, you don't have to cast it anymore. We'll talk about that. How you use text, set text. There's probably a get text in there as well. And then the rest of it's on scroll view. Again, you're probably very rarely, if ever, especially in this class, will use scroll views. Unless you're going to have, unless the app that you create on your own is going to be something that's very textual and you want it to be able to scroll. But other than that, you probably won't. All right. Now, the rest of the chapter that's here, and I'm not going to go through much of it, as it says, it's on resources to help you learn. What's kind of nice about this, is it's all documentation. So again, developer.android.com, they changed this page a lot, just so you know. So that's what it used to look like, doesn't look like that at all now. What's in there? Get Android Studio, you already did that. All right, browse sample code. They actually have sample projects in there that you can take a look at. And they've got code snippets in there too. Watch stories, as it says, you get stories of different developers. Hey, I started with nothing, I made this app and I made millions of dollars type of thing. All right. The developer console, we'll get into that stuff when we talk about actually taking our app and putting it on the Google Play Store. All right. And if it turns out that by, let's say, the end of next week, I'm ready to take my BMI one and put it out in the Google Play Store. If you can't afford it right now, you can watch me do it, and I will tape it, and you will go through the same steps, the same ones that I go through. All right. I know it may not be a big thing for you, but believe me, I had people 2 years ago, especially. I had a single mom. She was like, I don't have $25, literally. So, and I get it as much as I can get it. All right. So here's some of the stuff that's out there. Some more of the documentation. You can read that yourselves. A couple things I wanted to mention out of here. The developer videos. Some of these I've looked at, usually they're pretty short, but if they have one from a conference, they'll be at least an hour long. All right. And they'll be, hey, we're going to do this today. And you get to see all the bad developer humor and whatever. There's one of their conferences. I don't know what they did last year. I imagine the whole thing was virtual. But you can see, as it says, these are some of the videos, and they put them out there afterwards, which is kind of neat. Here's that code samples that I mentioned. There's samples and there's snippets. All right, I don't use them. I figure if I can't do it myself, or the way to learn it is to do it yourself. There are different activity templates. All right, this we've already talked about a little bit, and typically the only two that you will use in here are either empty or basic. The difference between those is basic has got a little, this is called a fab. And some people like that name. Some people think that's stupid. It stands for floating action button. And you can actually move this around. So if you don't want it there, if you want it here or whatever, you can put it there. But we're virtually all the time going to use the empty activity. All right. There is a developer blog. Sometimes there's good stuff in here. Stack Overflow. Have you both used Stack Overflow? Okay, good. And I think that's it. Yeah. So what we will do when you come in here on Tuesday, I'm going to check if his people have gone, you can go. But I don't know what to do otherwise. But I mean, that's what I had prepared today because I didn't know how long this would take. All right. I'm not trying to go through it real fast. We will slow down once we have a project that we built. When we add the activities and we add the intents, we'll do that as a class. This next chapter, though, is shorter, and chapter 3 is even shorter than that Chapter 3, I think, is only like about 15 or 20 pages. But Chapter 3 is, or Unit 3, whatever you call it, is on debugging. And I think it's important we go through that. So you will have a test. Next week, we're going to just work on projects. I will give you 1 or 2 to work on by yourself. And then not next week, but probably the following week, you'll have a test on Unit 1. And we go into Unit 2, but we'll do 2 and 3 together. When you have the test, it'll just be on Unit 2. The debugging, I'll just expect you'll know how to debug. All right, so that's what we're going to do, just so you have an idea. So let me pause this. Let me check.